with me, Yummy, Louie T. Welcome to the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I, of course, am your set man, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. So the reason that you're getting back-to-back days of live streams is because I'm not going to have a show tomorrow. I'm going to take the day off tomorrow. And remember, I was kind of mulling over that last night, and I told you I was going to make a decision. Well, I've made a decision. I'm going to take tomorrow off, spend time with my wife. And so, and really, the team's movements don't facilitate a video anyway. So it doesn't necessitate me actually being active tomorrow. So there was a walkthrough today, final practice before the final preseason game. So figured why not just knock everything out today, talk about what Ron Rivera said. And I actually thought, these pressers right before these preseason games seem to be very, meaty, a lot of meat on the bones, things that you can take away. And they're very short, compacted, but I feel like tons of information can be garnered from these pressers. So he said a lot today. We'll get into everything, and then I'll give you the 7 things I'm looking for in this third and final preseason game versus the Baltimore Ravens. So we should be in and out today and knock this thing out of here and keep it pushing. For those of you who are interested, I will be live right after this for the 286th installment of the LouieTeeNetwork podcast. It is a Throwback Thursday episode, so that one should be a lot of fun. With that said, let's jump into the festivities today. Walkthrough, so nothing major to report. No reason to even talk about guys that practiced or didn't practice because it was the walkthrough. Everybody can participate in that. So the biggest thing that I wanted to talk about was what Ron said after the walkthrough, and really in regards to, as we start to get closer to trimming down this roster to 53, what to look for in the upcoming game, the comfort level with certain players at specific positions. So let's get into that. So the first thing he talked about, Antonio Gibson at kick returner. So he essentially announced that Antonio Gibson is the team's starting kick returner. So that whole conversation is dead. We knew this. I told you the Chiefs game for me was the end all be all. I said, we're going to learn a lot about the thinking of this staff and where they are with Antonio Gibson in regards to his position and standing within the running back position, and you just all around being a weapon. We're going to find out how they feel about him. And their whole mindset has shifted and changed to where I think he ultimately should be, to be honest with you. I love him as a running back, and I think ultimately, as the season progresses, he may get back to being the lead back. You never know what's going to transpire, but I think this role for him as a do-it-all weapon, similar to Cordero Patterson, is probably better served for Antonio Gibson's skill set. Let him catch it out of the backfield, let him split out as a wide receiver, let him get some carries as a running back, and also let him return kickoffs. I think he will flourish in this role because he is a dynamic playmaker. And so Ron said he's getting more and more comfortable at kickoffs. Remember, this is not something that they're teaching him how to do. This is something that he just hasn't done since college. But he's done this before, and he was damn good at it. So it's not like this is foreign to him, and they're trying to teach him the nuances of returning kickoffs in the NFL. The guy has done this before. So, just more reps. The better he will be predetermined by how many reps he gets. So the reps in practice, invaluable. The reps in the game, priceless. That's kind of where they are. I expect him to play in this third preseason game on kickoffs. Maybe not necessarily taking any reps on offense or, first team, I don't think is going to be out there. Ron did talk about that again today. Briefly, we'll talk about that. But I don't think he'll play any offensive snaps. At least I wouldn't. But kickoff return, I wouldn't be shocked if they threw him out there once or twice. I wouldn't even do that personally. Again, there's no upside to him returning kicks in a preseason game. But if you really think Antonio Gibson is a huge part of your football team, which he is, then there is no reason for him to be out there the third preseason game. And that's just my view on the whole situation. My take on everything is my perspective is none of the starters should play in this third preseason game. We'll see what happens, though. But he essentially announced that Antonio Gibson is the kick returner. We knew that. I told you guys after that second preseason game, this is the new, norm for us. He's going to be the kick returner. Dax Milne is going to be the punt returner. They're going to get rid of and trim off the fat of Alex Erickson, and that's how they're going to go about that. Ron talked about wanting a dual return man, a guy that could do both kickoff and punts. Well, once Antonio Gibson was thrusted into that kickoff role, that died because they tried him on punt returns in practice, but that's not what they want him back there doing. He's not a natural punt returner. He did not do that in college. Let somebody who's natural, because that's different than being, in the end zone, catching the football by yourself without anybody around. That's totally different than, having guys screaming down at you and having to see where they are in relation to where you are and whether you're going to be able to catch this and get a return or should you fair catch it, and judging the ball and seeing it. That's a totally different animal. And if you haven't done that, this is not the time to try to start figuring that out. Either you've done it before or I don't want you doing it at all in terms of punt returns. It takes a different special type of individual to do that. Kickoffs, you're back there fielding that thing by yourself. Okay. The guys aren't going to be near you. You've got 15 to 20 yards of real estate to make a decision on what you want to do before you catch that football. You're fine. So, I think Gibson is going to be the kick returner, and I think he's going to excel at that. And Ron pretty much said that this is a done deal. He's our kick returner. So, Ron talked about signing Wes Martin. So remember yesterday I mentioned the signing of Wes Martin briefly, and I said I don't think that I'm going to put too much stock into it. The only thing that's different about Wes Martin being here is that he's coming back here, and this is a guy that they were familiar with, and it's a little different when there's familiarity, whereas if they're signing a guy we've never heard of that's just coming here to probably be a body for this third preseason game so they don't have to throw any of their guys out there that they don't want to expose, then that's what it is. But Wes is a little different because he's got history here. And so I was intrigued by what he said about Wes Martin. So Wes has sticking power. Now, not making the 53-man roster, but practice squad wise, Wes has sticking power. So Ron said that, they really liked Wes. Last year, he got plucked off of their practice squad. And so they it sucked. They didn't love that Wes Martin was poached away, but it happened. And so he said, the opportunity arose for them to be able to get their hands back on Wes. And they decided to do that. He talked about his positional flex. Ron is a sucker for positional flex. Wes can play both, all three interior positions, both guards and center. And, he's been in the system before, so he knows the offense. So that's a big added plus for him. But also, he said something that really stuck out to me. One phrase in particular that made me think, okay, I get it. And he said, Wes is a nice, stout interior offensive lineman. And when he uses that phrase, it lets me know that they're not comfortable with Keith Ishmael being in there in an emergency situation because he isn't stout. That's his problem. Keith Ishmael is a guy that when he's on the move is phenomenal. I called him a finesse offensive lineman. When we drafted him out of San Diego State, I said he's a finesse offensive lineman. He's not a guy that wins with brute force. He's not solid at the point of attack in terms of holding his ground. We've seen him bullied, okay? We've seen him pushed 4 or 5 yards into the backfield on a run play that's going to the outside. We've seen him manhandled. In that Chiefs game, there were a couple of times where the pocket collapsed because Keith Ishmael couldn't hold up at the point of attack. We saw a couple of times where he didn't, understand what was going on and allowed a free hitter to come in and sack Sam Howell. So I don't think they're comfortable with Keith Ishmael. They appreciated what he did last year in a pinch when they didn't have any more options and they turned to him. He gave them some quality snaps. But you want a guy inside, especially at center. You do not want that pocket crumbling in front of your quarterback. And the hope is Keith Ishmael or Wes Martin or any of those guys at the back end of the roster on the practice squad have to play. That's when you're in dire straits. But if it should come to that, like it did last year, you would much prefer a guy that's stouter inside, that's not going to allow the pocket to crumble, that's not going to be bull rushed into the quarterback's lap, not going to give up a ton of ground in the run game. And so Wes Martin gives them a little bit more stoutness. I think he's more suited to be a center in this league than a guard. I don't love his mobility in terms of Wes Martin, but I do love his stoutness, his physicality. And I think Ron and company appreciate that as well. And so I'm thinking Wes Martin is here to take over for Keith Ishmael. I wouldn't be shocked if Keith Ishmael is cut and isn't brought back onto the practice squad. It would not shock me at all in the least if they instead subbed him out for Wes Martin. Just something to keep an eye on. Ron talked about the cutting process and how it never is something that he gets used to. He hates this, but he has to do it. And I think there is a little bit of him being an ex-player, him having gone through this process, him himself being cut, toward the tail end of his career, that there's a little bit of himself that he sees in these players where you see your dream dying right before your very eyes, or, you're being told that you're not good enough at this current moment. And you can tell a guy it's a numbers game, this, that, and the third, but you're not. What you're effectively telling me is that I'm not on the roster. And for some guys, you were just hoping to be on the practice squad. For others, they were looking to make the 53-man roster. So he's like, you never, ever become numb to that process. It never is something that is jaded. It's always tough. He said he hates it. And I get it. You're telling, after this game, he will have to tell 27 guys that they're fired, essentially. And maybe 15, 10 to 15 of them, hey, we'd love to have you back on the practice squad, however. It's a tough business. He talked about Sadiq Charles's position flex and how he's continuing to grow on the interior of the offensive line. He said, because remember, I don't think I brought this up to you guys, but Sadiq Charles was taking reps at center and taking snaps at center this past week. So they're trying to get him in a position where he can also play center. That's not a natural position for him. Remember, he started out his career at LSU as a tackle, got here. We wanted him to be a tackle. We kicked him inside. He's got some tackle ability. I don't love him as a tackle. I think he's more suited to play guard. I think they've come to that realization as well. And so I think with that acknowledgement, they also have said, well, shit, if he's going to kick inside, let's teach him to play center as well. So he gives us the same positional flex as Wes Schweitzer. He's not there yet, but they're going to try to get him there. And they feel like he's coming along slowly but surely as a guy that can play all three interior offensive line positions. He talked about Cole Turner and the injury that he has sustained and, how that limits him as a rookie. As a rookie, the biggest thing is just getting in there, getting your feet wet. Ron talked about the speed of the game and how a lot of the rookies were taken aback by the amount of speed and the difference in speed from the collegiate game to the NFL. And so Ron said that was the biggest thing that he was worried about with Cole Turner. Like, in terms of, retaining the offense, knowing what to do, knowing where to line up, all that stuff, he feels like Cole Turner is a smart kid and he can figure that stuff out. But, can he adjust to the speed of the game? He hasn't played in a single preseason game. Practice is one thing. A game is a totally different animal. And so a total different animal. And so I don't know if he'll be ready to just jump in and not feel that difference. But we'll see. Only time will tell. Obviously, he's still not back from the injury quite yet. I'll say next week, I'll be looking for Cole Turner and John Bates to be being integrated back into practice and having those guys be on track to be ready for week number 1. He talked about the Wentz-McLaurin connection and how that's continuing to grow and blossom. He said that this was probably their best week together in terms of them starting to get into that rhythm that you want with your quarterback and number 1 wide receiver. Said they had some beautiful connections this week. A couple of them went for touchdowns. And so he feels like that chemistry is really starting to build and that those two are starting to gel together. Obviously, Terry getting into, camp and OTAs, not camp, but the OTAs in the offseason program, really missing most of that due to his contract situation, kind of stunted their growth. They got a late start, but I think they're making up for lost time. Feels like they're getting in a good spot, and hopefully they'll be ready to fire on all cylinders come week 1 versus Jacksonville. And then he talked about a couple of things to wrap up. He talked about Sam Howell and his development and how this is really just a learning season for Sam Howell. For those of you who think there's a chance he could end up at number 2 on the depth chart or, somehow getting in the game this season, the goal is for him to not see the field under any circumstance. Like I've said, if anything were to go awry with Carson Wentz and the season is still in the balance, they're going to Taylor Heinicke. He is the clear number 2 in the backup on this football team. There is not a competition nor a debate about that. However, if we're out of it late in the season and then we've got 3 games left, there's no reason to play Heinicke. You know what he is. That's when you would turn the reins over to Sam Howell. But, I can't imagine us having that position being put in front of us this season with the way everything's set up. But you never know. You know how things go. You know how this organization has been in the past. Anything's possible. Everything's on the table. But with the way I'm feeling right now, there's no way we're going to have 3 games left in the season. And I keep bringing this up. I keep harking back to this, but that's just how I feel. I mean, last year we had 2 games left in the season and we were still technically alive against that. When we lost to the Eagles, technically our season wasn't done. It was done, but technically had we beat the Eagles in that game, and we were very close, anything could have happened. We weren't, mathematically eliminated, but we weren't going to make the playoffs, and we didn't need to go anywhere with the state of our roster at that time. But I only bring that up because if last year, with everything that we dealt with the schedule that we played, with everything being what it was, with the roster being in the shape that it was in, for us to be in it down to the final 2 weeks, I can't see a situation where we're not in it to the very bitter end, even if we don't make it this season. So this is about Sam Howell just acclimating himself to the NFL. He's excited to see him get this opportunity because he is going to play the vast majority of this game. You may see Heinicke for the first, possession or 2, but after that, it's the Sam Howell show. I wouldn't even be shocked if they just put Howell out there for the beginning to the end. They started him out there and that he played the entire game. But even if he doesn't, it'll be most of the game, probably half of the first quarter and the remainder of the game. So he just talked about him, continuing to learn. He loves the quarterback room as it's constructed right now and feels like he'll continue to grow and learn from the 2 guys ahead of him. And that's all they're really looking for Sam Howell to do at this point, is just continue to learn and soak up as much information as he can and look at how these guys prepare on game weeks and kind of mimic that and then, take it to that next level. So finally, he talked about the starters and what they play in this game, and he just reiterated what he said at the end of his last presser, which was very limited. They're not playing, man. There's no way. I think Ron is trying to keep it, alive just in case for some reason he just gets an inkling tomorrow that he wakes up. He already knows. There's no I need to sleep on it aspect to this. He just wants to keep that door open just in case he decides to play them. The likelihood is that he's not going to play them. Ron isn't playing these guys. I remember Ron's words vividly after the preseason game. This is why I didn't play my guys when J.K. Dobbins went down. And nothing's changed since then. He hates the preseason. Ron has made no bones about it. He can't stand the preseason. He's not putting his guys out there. Even if he thinks they need a little bit of work, I don't think he's playing them. But if that window is somewhat open, he wants to make sure that he's not eating his words. If he tells them the starters aren't playing and then he has a change of heart and does play them, then everyone's will be like, yo, what the hell? You told us they weren't playing. So he's just leaving that door slightly ajar. But that door is essentially shut. They're not playing, I don't think. So we'll see. Anyway, I failed to mention this last night. I meant to mention this last night, but I saw a tweet. I don't remember who it was from, but there was a little bit of clarity as to Chase Young's situation and why his rehab is taking a little bit longer. So, I told you guys and this has been told to all of us, that injury that Chase Young sustained was a little bit more severe than just your random standard run-of-the-mill ACL tear. It wasn't just a, hey, let's go in here, clean it up and, go on and have him rehab. There was more damage done. Now, a lot of times when there's more damage, we don't usually find that stuff out because they don't have to and they don't really need to disclose that information, but every now and again, some of that information gets out there, or the player just feels comfortable telling us. Like, Logan Thomas felt comfortable telling us after the fact, hey, this is what happened to my knee. I had a lot of stuff going on, and he broke down exactly what was the problem. He was like, it wasn't just a torn ACL. It was this happened, and this happened, and they had to fix this, and fix that. So we haven't gotten that from Chase, and I don't think you're going to. But I saw a tweet where someone said it wasn't just a torn ACL. He also ruptured his patella tendon, and that had to be repaired as well with his injury, which is what has extended his timetable for return out a little bit further than the guys that you've seen tear their ACLs and seem like they're back on the mend and ready to go. I.e. Logan Thomas, who injured his after Chase's, didn't have a torn, ruptured patella tendon. And so everybody's situation is different. I always tell you guys that. And so he's able to come back a little bit faster than Chase is. So just a little food for thought. You guys do the dishes. I just wanted to throw that out there. I don't know if you had seen that or not, but that's part of the reason why his recovery process and timetable is a little bit further out than some guys that may have torn theirs after he did or right around the same amount of time, and seem to be getting back sooner than he has gotten back from his injury. But in any event, let's go ahead, knock out the 7 things that I'm going to be looking for in this Ravens preseason game. Look, it's a preseason game. It's the 3rd preseason game. There's not a lot of enthusiasm for this thing, so I'm not going to bore you with this. There is no suspense here. Just run through these real quick. All right. So number 7, the defensive ends battling it out. So with Chase Young being on the shelf for the first 4 weeks, being placed on the PUP list, I think the defensive end, position is a lot easier to diagnose now. Had he been like Logan Thomas, not starting the season on the PUP list, it would have made things very interesting. You would have had to trim off some fat. I don't think you would have been in a position to keep 10 defensive linemen because you're going to keep 4 defensive tackles, and you're going to more likely than not keep 5 defensive ends. Well, with Chase being on the PUP list, it's easy now to keep 5 guys and not feel bad about cutting someone that you really want to retain. Obviously, it's going to be Montez Sweat. It's going to be James Smith-Williams, Casey Toohill. They really like F.A. Obata. They signed him to play here. They think he's got the ability to kick inside and give them a little something there. So he gives you 4. And then I think the 5th and final guy is going to be Shaka Toney, not just because of what he brings as a pass rusher, but because he also doubles as a core special teamer. So I think that's your 5 defensive ends. Now, Chase comes back. Someone's got to go. Is that F.A. Obata? Is it, Shaka Toney? We will figure that out and cross that bridge when we get there. Also, a name to watch is William Bradley King. If there's a battle between the two, it'll be Shaka Toney and William Bradley King. Will they go for the stoutness of William Bradley King, or will they go for the upside and the explosion of Shaka Toney in addition to his ability to play special teams? I think they'll side with that, and that's why Shaka Toney will be the 5th and final defensive end. And then, also on that 7 line is ending the Ravens win streak. Look, it's really insignificant. I don't care. Neither do you. But it'd be pretty cool to knock them off and end their 22-game win streak, right? Like, who doesn't want to do that? But no, we're not going into this game hyped up to try to stop the Ravens win streak in the preseason. Okay, they can have it. If them getting to 23 straight victories, is what has to happen for us to stay healthy. By all means, you got it. It's all yours. I'm not looking to get anybody injured at the expense of trying to end the Ravens win streak. But if Sam Howell can go out there and ball and score 30 points and dethrone the Ravens as the preseason champs, that'd be nice. But I'm not looking for it necessarily, but I'm not turning it down if that were to fall into our lap either. Number 6, the running backs pushing the limit. So right now, to me, the limit on the roster is 3. All right. The limit is 3. But the running backs can push that limit to heights we haven't seen under Ron Rivera. They have never kept more than 3 running backs since Rivera's gotten here. In the 2 years Rivera's had to construct the roster, it's been 3 running backs every year. This is a year where they could push that thing out to 4. Now, it would have to come at the expense of another position on the team, but I think it's very capable of being a position that garners 4 guys because, again, if Antonio Gibson is your third back, which technically he would be, you don't want him on all those special teams. But your third running back or the last running back on the depth chart has to be a core special teamer. So that's an interesting dynamic. Well, that's something worth keeping an eye on during this preseason game. Is Jarrett Patterson playing special teams? Is he doing it effectively? Because that could be his way to making the team. Same thing, with Jonathan Williams. He's been banged up this week, so that could be Jarrett Patterson's opportunity to not only solidify himself as that next guy up, even if he doesn't make the team, but the first guy off the practice squad, but he could maybe sneak on to the 53-man roster if he shows them the ability to play special teams at a high enough level. I like to think that it's going to be 3 running backs when it's all said and done. We'll see. 5th on the list, Dax Milne nailing down the punt returning duties. So at this point, he's going to be the punt returner. But the one thing we don't want to see in this final preseason game is him muff a punt. That's the one thing right now. I actually feel confident that the one thing I can count on with Dax Milne is that he's going to field the punt and he's not going to do anything stupid, right? He's not going to fumble it. He's not going to drop the ball. There was a tough catch he made against Kansas City. The ball was kind of swirling around and he ran up and caught it down the sidelines. That's a great sign. Like, he understands getting underneath the ball, getting behind it, and then running and catching it. And, really you want to be able to catch the football, not on a dead sprint, because that's how you drop it a lot of times. You really want to just get the ball, get behind it, and catch it. You don't want to be moving around left to right or backing up trying to catch it. You want to be under the ball and have it fall right on, right into your body and corral it and have it be there. But I don't want to see him muffing anything. Like, my confidence level with him, at least fielding the punt, is at 100 right now. All right. I'd like it to stay there. And I don't need my confidence level taking a hit in Dax Milne's ability to field a punt. So I just want to make sure he nails down that, return duty by just fielding everything. To me, icing on the cake is, we got a 15-yard return. Let's go. Great field position. That's awesome. I'm not looking for that with Dax Milne. I just want him to field it cleanly and give the ball to the offense. So that's number 5. Number 4, the 5th cornerback battle and the 5th safety battle. And maybe even the safety position being pushed out to 6. We had this discussion yesterday that we know the 5th cornerback battle is probably the hottest battle we have left. The 4th defensive tackle has already been decided, which is why it's not on this list, because Daniel Wise locked that up after the first preseason game. There's not really much to talk about at linebacker. Safety, I really think that's already a done deal as well. The only real question for me is are they going to extend it out to 6? Because I think Jeremy Reaves is making this football team this year. Everyone talks about his intellect as a football player, high football IQ. They talk about, his toughness, physicality, and then they just talk about his relentlessness. This is a guy that continues to get cut, never goes away, always comes up, always shows up, and continues to be a core, player for this football team from a special team standpoint and really a morale standpoint as well. So Ron has taken a liking to Jeremy Reaves. There was an article written about Ron's affinity for Jeremy Reaves and how he appreciates him at a much greater level now. And so I just see Jeremy Reaves making his team, but Stephen Parker can make it interesting and say, hey, why not keep 6 safeties? We'll see. I don't think they're going to do that. But, if he looks anything like he did in the preseason game, number 1 against Carolina, he's going to have a shot to make things interesting. I think the real battle is at corner because we still don't know what they're going to do at that number 5 spot. DeJuan Neal is a guy that we said keep an eye on. I don't think he's going to enter into the fray. I don't think they're keeping 6. I don't think this is a position that warrants you, that necessitates that you keep 6. It's just not enough talent there right now as constructed. I think 5 is the magic number. We know of the first 4 guys. The 5th guy is interesting because I think it's a battle between 2. We can add DeJuan Neal in there if you like. I don't want to count him out. He's still here. And so he's in the mix. But I think it's really between Corn Elder and the 7th round pick, Christian Holmes. And so that to me is going to be interesting. Not only how they play on the field defensively, but also how they fare special teams wise. Elder, to me, is a veteran. He's got the upper hand. He's been in the league. This team is ready to win now. You much rather put a guy out there with NFL experience, but he's not super old. It's not like Corn Elder's 30. He's 26, right? So while he's a veteran, he hasn't been in the league super long, still got a lot of good football left in front of him. I think he has the upper hand, but we'll see what Christian Holmes has to say about that. You know, teams love to hold on to their guys that they drafted. He was a 7th round pick. You don't feel bad cutting a 7th rounder and stashing him away on the practice squad, but you'd love to keep him and say, hey, you know, we kept just about every guy that we drafted this past year. That's how good we feel about this past year's draft class. You'd love to say that. But the reality of the situation is he may not make the football team. He may be on the practice squad, and that's okay. So that 5th cornerback battle is something I'll be keeping an eye on. Number 3 is Sam Howell's development. All right, so he's going to play the majority of the game. I already talked about him when referring to Ron's comments after practice today. But, you know, just to elaborate a bit more, he's going to play the vast majority, if not all, of this entire game. So the spotlight will be on Sam Howell for more likely than not the last time this season, because after this, his name will be an afterthought. We won't be talking about Sam Howell once September 11th hits. It'll all be about the guys that are playing and contributing at a high level, and Sam will be reduced to a ball cap and an earpiece for the remainder of the season. So this is his last opportunity to show what he's capable of, you know, in his rookie campaign, what he's learned to this point, and to go out and show it on the football field. Okay. He'll be reduced to, you know, the show team, as Ron likes to call them, and running the plays of the other team the remainder of the season for the most part. That'll be his job. So this is his opportunity to show what he's learned, how he's grown as a quarterback in his rookie season, and hopefully he'll play well tonight. Number 2, Antonio Gibson on kickoffs. If he were to play, I don't think it would be very long. I don't think he would be out there returning every kickoff. Might be Washington wins the toss and elects to receive, and he's out there for the opening kickoff, and then that's it. You know? So we'll see. Again, I wouldn't even do that. To me, there's no reason to even do that, but we'll see. And then number 1 is, will the starters play? You know, Ron's been very coy about the starters, and, you know, very limited has been his response to any questions regarding the starters in his 3rd preseason game. They're not playing. But if they do play, that's the number 1 storyline, right? If they play, how do they fare? Does the offense go down the field and score a touchdown? Does the defense get a 3 and out? Do they finally get off the field on the 3rd down? I don't think you want to put the defense out there, honestly, because if you go out there against the Ravens backups, which is what they would be playing against, the Ravens, after what happened with J.K. Dobbins last year, I'm pretty sure that scarred John Harbaugh, and he's not going to put his starters out there in any capacity, including the offense. I wouldn't even be shocked if they didn't take Tyler Huntley and removed him from this game altogether as well, because he's been so phenomenal, and they know what he is now after he played so much last year and what he's done in the preseason this year. I don't need to see him. I wouldn't be shocked if they took their 3rd quarterback and put him in there and gave him this entire game to play. But the last thing you want is for our defense, to have issues with the Ravens' 2nd or 3rd string offense. Like, even if you didn't game plan and, you know, it's one guy, this, that, nobody cares. If you can't get a stop against the Ravens' 3rd team, their scout team, essentially, that's problematic, and you're really going to have people losing their shit. There's no benefit to playing your players here. You can't win, because if you get a stop and you feel good about it, it was the Ravens' 2nd, 3rd string offense, whatever the case may be. Like, you're not getting any points for that. No one's giving you any credit for that. And if you don't get the stop, it's big news, here in the local area. Like, we're going to lose our shit. So to me, there's no upside to playing your starters here. Even if you were just looking to build confidence, it could backfire. There's the risk versus the reward just doesn't balance itself out. The risk is way too high. The reward is way too small, if there's any reward at all, because there's no guarantee that the momentum that you claim to be looking to build in this game even transfers over to the regular season opener versus Jacksonville. So I don't think the starters are playing, but that's number one. If they play, that's what we'll be fixated on in this football game. I can tell you this. I think there will be more starters playing in this third preseason game than last year. The Bucs have already said Brady and all the healthy starters will be out there in this third preseason game. And I'm pretty sure there are a couple teams around the league not satisfied with the way their team has looked. Jacksonville, I wouldn't be shocked to see Trevor Lawrence in that offense and that defense. It's a young team. When you're a young team, you got to get as many reps as you can. I wouldn't be shocked to see the Jags play their starters for a possession or two. Same thing with the Houston Texans, with Davis Mills. I wouldn't be shocked if they played Davis Mills for a possession or two, just to get, the juices going one final time. Remember, there's an extended amount of time now where you're not playing a game. This third preseason game, there's still a week in between the start of the regular season and this final preseason game with no fourth preseason game. It's a lot of time to not have these guys playing in live action. So I wouldn't be shocked, but I don't think we need to be among those teams. We're not a super young team that doesn't have aspirations this year. Like, we feel like we can do some damage this year. So there's, to me, no upside. Anyway, I wouldn't be shocked to see a lot of teams that haven't been pleased with what they've seen from their first team offense or defense throwing their players out there for a possession or two. And like I said, I wouldn't be shocked if Ron did it. I wouldn't advise him to do it, but I wouldn't be shocked if he did. I don't think he will. So let's get to the comment section, knock these out, and then I will let you guys go, and I will get prepared for my podcast. So start off with a super chat from Colton Wheeler. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you, my guy, Colton Wheeler. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Writes, am I crazy for feeling like I saw enough out of Jared Patterson last year to be comfortable with him as running back 4? No, you're not crazy for feeling that way. Jared Patterson was solid last year. The biggest issue with him is that his size, which is why I didn't get drafted. He's not a big dude. He's not overly explosive or super dynamic. He's just a really solid running back. I like him though, and he serves a purpose. Like, he could be a great value version of J.D. McKissick. But here's my issue with Jared Patterson is that if anything goes awry with J.D. McKissick, I'd much rather just have the other two backs, pick up the load there and say, all right, Gibson, you're going to get more of a workload as a pass catcher, and Robinson, we'll throw it to you a little bit as well. Then just say, all right, Jared Patterson, you're in there, because he's so small and he's not a great pass protector. And so there's so many issues with him being in there. But as a runner, he's instinctive. He's a guy that can get some yards after contact, but he's not a super powerful or a super explosive and electric or dynamic runner. So he's kind of like caught in no man's land, so to speak. He's not a 4-3-8 guy, because with his size, you got to have some kind of ridiculous redeeming quality or trait. So if you're going to be his size, like you keep hearing Darren Sproles last year, he's not Darren Sproles, because Darren Sproles was running like a 4-3-8. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not what Jared Patterson's doing. And so you say, all right, well, then he's got to be like this physical bowling ball bouncing off of defenders type of runner, and he's not. So if you're not super physical, if you're not super fast, what are you? He's kind of in the middle. But he's a solid football player. And if he were to make the team as the fourth running back, no one would bat an eye. Not a single fan would say, oh, what are they doing? He's been solid. All right. Let's see. Red Wings 01. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you, My guy Red Wings 01 writes, B-Rob and Gibby are basically our version of Zeke and Pollard. You got a workhorse, power runner, and a versatile playmaker. JD is the cherry on top. I would say that Gibby is, I would say JD is more of Pollard to me than Gibby is in that analogy, because Tony Pollard, and you remember Tony Pollard and Gibson went to school at Memphis together, played on the same team. So they're very similar in their skill sets, but I think they're totally different runners. I think JD McKissick having that same wide receiver background as Antonio Gibson, I think he's more of the natural receiver, which Tony Pollard is. And Pollard had that same kind of background, running back, wide receiver type, and dynamic kick returner. And so I think JD McKissick kind of fits that bill and mold a little bit more than than Antonio Gibson does. But I get your point. To your point, Brian Robinson is more of the hammer, like Zeke Elliott. And Pollard is that change of pace. He comes in, he's dynamic, can hurt you in a multitude of ways. And Pollard, I don't know if he's still returning kickoffs, for the Cowboys, but at one point he was returning kickoffs and he was dynamic at that as well. And so that's where I could see the Antonio Gibson comparison there. You're not wrong. I would sub out Gibby and put in JD, but in your analogy, I could see some of the similarities. And remember, Pollard and Gibson both played at Memphis together and had similar roles on that football team. So I totally understand where you're coming from there. And JD, he's more than just a cherry on top, man. He's so good, and he's such a big part of what we do. Like, a cherry on top is a guy that isn't a necessity. And I remember my defense mechanisms kicking in when I thought we were losing JD McKissick. I was like, hey, we'll be fine. We don't have to have him. That was just me kind of putting up my defense mechanism like, damn, we lost JD. What are we going to do? But we'll be fine, trying to convince myself, but knowing that shit hurt. He's been one of our leading receivers the last 2 years. Like, that would have been a big loss for this offense. And having him back is huge for us. So it's more than just a cherry on top, but to your point, he's definitely, I think he's not only the cherry, he sprinkles, and maybe some, if you've ever been to Dairy Queens and gotten a Blizzard, I was a Cheesequake Blizzard guy. He's a couple more chunks of that nice cheesecake inside of that Blizzard with a cherry and some sprinkles on top. And that's JD McKissick. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Got another super chat, I believe I do, here from Landry Balbin. Thank you for the super chat, Landry Balbin. Greatly appreciate you. My guy Landry Balbin writes, Louie, B-Rob and Gibby will be used like Ingram and AK. Does this mean JD's job is at stake next year? Who is our Deebo Samuel? Is it Samuel or Gibson? So I don't know if, I mean, maybe, I guess you could say it, because Alvin Kamara, does return kicks every now and again. And he is more of a pass catching running back, but he can run the football, can Alvin Kamara. So yeah, I could see that. I could see that. From a size standpoint, he kind of fits that profile. I think people look at Alvin Kamara and just think, oh, he's a smaller back. Alvin Kamara is a legit 215, damn near 220, so and Gibson's cut weight and he's down to around that 220 range himself. So yeah, I could see him being in an Alvin Kamara type role, and I could see Brian Robinson being more of the Mark Ingram type, Alabama back. So yeah, I could definitely see that. No, JD's job is not at stake next year. JD McKissick is a totally different animal. What he brings to the table is unlike many backs in the league. Like, Austin Eckler is the best comparison to what JD McKissick is. And I think it's McKissick, Eckler, and Kamara all in that same group as the most receptions over the last 2 years at the running back position. And so JD McKissick is a different type of beast. So what he brings to the table, these other guys can catch, but they're not the route runner. that J.D. McKissick is. They don't uncover like J.D. McKissick does. So the knock I have on J.D. McKissick, and J.D. actually is a really tough runner in between the tackles, and obviously he can turn the corner. My biggest knock on him is contact balance. Like it doesn't take much to get J.D. McKissick on the ground. That frustrates me. If he had any kind of, that's the separation between him and like an Alvin Kamara or an Austin Eckler. Those guys have tremendous contact balance. J.D. McKissick, if you just blow on him hard enough, he'll fall down. But it won't be before he makes you miss maybe once, but if you just push him, he's going down. And Deebo Samuel on this team, the closest thing you'll get to him is probably Curtis Samuel, right? But it could be Gibson, depending on how they utilize him. But I see the jet sweeps. I see I see them using Curtis Samuel in a multitude of ways. We'll see if he gets the, running back carries like Deebo Samuel did for the 49ers. We'll see if they hand it to him, toss it to him out of the backfield like when he was in Carolina and get him the ball that way in certain situations. See if they're going to be really creative with Curtis Samuel, or if they're just going to jet sweep us to death and wide receiver screen us to death and then, use him as a regular wide receiver out in the route. We'll see. I think that might be the last super. Nope, got one more here from Red Wings 01. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Red Wings 01. Thank you for the super chat, who writes, never root for injuries, but football gods are handing us week 4 on a silver platter with all the Cowboy injuries. Take advantage. I mean, I don't root for injuries either. I hate them. And even when it's our most hated rival, I don't want to see the injuries. They suck. And I wouldn't wish them on anyone because I don't want them. Someone, a Washington fan, because I tweeted out damn when I heard the Tyron Smith news. And, I tweeted out damn, and of course, the injury reaper. And to a Washington fan responded with the Grinch smirk and then hashtag HTTC. And I was like, no, you will not. I said, no, I will not have that bad juju come this way with your foolishness. I said, I rebuke your post in the name of a winning season. And I had a gif of a pastor with a Bible, like, get that out of here, devil. I rebuke that foolishness in the name of a winning season. We will not bring that bad juju to our doorstep. We are not smiling, laughing, or rejoicing over the injuries of other players that are on teams that we can't stand. That's not something that I will ever do. I've never been a guy that wants to see other players get hurt. It's just not something that, to me, is a good look. Never root for anyone to get injured. I want you at your best. I don't want any excuses. I told you during the course of a season, injuries happen. And if we catch you without a guy being healthy, that's the name of the game, right? I'm not looking to see injuries that put a guy out for the entire season. That's not how it goes. That's not what I'm looking for. But, if you turn your ankle in the game prior, the week before, and now you're a game time decision and you're a key player, you're damn right. I'll take advantage of that. Yeah. Because 6 weeks from then, the player, the fans of that team, if we beat you, will be like, well, we didn't even have this person when we played y'all the first time. And that's cool. And that's facts. But when we look back on that dub, we're not going to be sifting through the particulars of that 24-10 victory. Hey, we won that game. It's in the left-hand column. Let's keep it pushing. So I never root for guys to get injured. That's the garbage part of, especially football, since it's such a physical sport. That's the bad part of the game. You know what I mean? Is the injuries. So you never want to see it, but that's been his move his entire career. But I'll talk more about that on the podcast for sure. So that's going to do it for me, your man, Louie T. If you're out there and you haven't already done so, please do me a huge solid and hit the subscribe button for more great content. Turn on that notification bell so you don't miss any of that great content. And hit the like button if you haven't already done so. There's over 220 of you out there and only 85 likes. We can do so much better. Hit that like button, run those numbers up, and get it over 100 before this stream meets its conclusion. With that said, you will not hear from me tomorrow unless something crazy happens. And even then, I'm probably not going to post tomorrow. However, you will see me Saturday night at the end of that Ravens game. We will be live breaking it all down, and I'll kind of be ready to formulate an opinion as to what will happen with the 53-man roster based off of what we saw in the game. We'll talk about Sam Howell's performance, whether the starters played or not. We'll discuss that as well. And anything under the sun that you guys want to talk about as we bring the preseason to a close finally. So until then, I am a Washington fan, etched in burgundy and gold. My Washington spirit will never die. Washington spirit will never fold. Until we meet again, post up and take command. You guys know what it is. Enjoy your weekend. Have tons of fun. Be safe. And we will reconvene Saturday night at the conclusion of the third preseason game. I got one more super chat, it looks like, on the way out from my guy Landry Bulbin. Double up. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Don't know if I said that the first time or not. And thank you for doubling up, Landry Bulbin, who writes, captains will be Terry, Carson, Thomas, Allen, Chase, Holcomb. Tressway will replace DeShazer. I don't think I have any issues with that. The only guy that I think is left out here is, I think Charles Leno is morphing into a leader on this team. I would bet that he is a captain. Did Holcomb have the C on his chest last year? I'm going to look it up. You have me interested now. If he didn't, I don't think Holcomb's a captain this year. Let me look it up real quick. Washington football team captains 2021. Let's see. Captains last year were the captains last year were Chase Young, Jonathan Allen, Terry McLaurin, Brandon Sheriff, Ryan Fitzpatrick, John Bostic, Logan Thomas, and DeShazer Everett. So obviously there's no more Sheriff, Fitzpatrick, or Bostic, or Everett. So there were 8 captains last year. 4 of those guys remain: Chase Young, Jonathan Allen, Terry McLaurin, and Logan Thomas. So just assume that they're going to continue their captaincies. But there are 4 spots available. And so Carson, I think, is going to be one of those guys. I do agree there. I think Charles Leno Jr. is going to be another captain. I can see him being one there. I think I like the Tressway captain. He's the elder statesman on the team. I think he's respected enough. I could see them making him a captain. And that's 3. They don't have to have 8. They can have 7. But I don't think Holcomb is going to be a captain. So there you have it. I got 7 captains. We'll see if they go with 8 or not. Chase, Jonathan Allen, Terry, Logan Thomas, Carson Wentz, Charles Leno Jr., and I'll give Tressway the nod as the 7th guy. Trying to think of someone who's been here long enough, who's garnered the respect of the staff to the point where he would, and also the respect of the players. I don't really. Bobby McCain is a guy that kind of comes to mind. I wouldn't be shocked if Bobby McCain made it 8, but I'm going to stop at Tress Way at 7. Anyway, we'll see. That's an interesting discussion, and we'll see what happens, what they decide to do. But that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T. I thank you guys for joining me on this Command Post Live show mid-afternoon. You guys are the best. Looking forward to chopping it up with you Saturday night after the Ravens preseason finale, or the Washington Commanders versus the Ravens preseason finale. And we'll put a bow on the preseason and finally turn our attention to the start of the regular season. Until then, you guys know what to do. God bless and good night.
LouieTeeNetwork.